Okay, so welcome everyone to Heart to Heart. Today we have the honor to have Dr. Larry Swartz, or Uncle Larry as we affectionately call him. Larry has been an educator for over 4 decades. He was in a classroom and a consultant in the Peel District School Board for 24 years. And for the past 20 years, Larry's been an instructor in the teacher education program at the Ontario Institute for Studies in Education, where he has taught courses in literacy, dramatic arts, and children's literature for both elementary and secondary candidates. And this is how I know Larry. I adore working with Larry and have worked with him for over 20 years. He's written several books, all by Pembroke Publishers, to guide educators to use children's literature as a foundation for learning in the classroom. Some of those books are Take Me to Your Readers, Creating Caring Classrooms, and most recently, Teaching Tough Topics. How do I use children's literature to build a deeper understanding of social justice, diversity, and equity? And I think, Larry, I would like to give honorable mention to classroom events through poetry. I would always say that Larry, I give him full credit for teaching me how to teach poetry, and that book is a must-have for any teacher who wants to learn how to teach poetry. It is a fabulous book. So, Larry, thank you so much for all your work. The students love working with you, and I love working with you. So let's get started here, and I have some questions for you. So what do you love about teaching, Larry?
Okay, what I love about teaching, let's see, a spontaneous answer. I think it's about connections. So it's making connections to the community of learners, whether I'm dealing with my 10, 11-year-old rascals, or I'm working with adults in a noisy classroom. I think it's about making connections and helping them make connections. So for me, it's about community building, how we work hard to trust each other, learn from each other, and care about each other, which hopefully the students of whatever age can transfer into their own lives outside of the classroom. So I think it's that word community and collaboration. And I have been so lucky in my career, absolutely top to bottom, to be in a community of learners. The schools, I had amazing principals, that's P-A-L-S, principals, who brought us together as a community. And I'm not going to name names, but I mean, there's just too many because I taught for many years. And then I was a consultant, so I worked as a team at OISE, collaborating with colleagues. So it's just about that community and collaboration that's been vital. And I've been very, very lucky to have that in many capacities. And that's why it's exciting to teach.
Yeah, me too. And you and I are on the same page when it comes to community and collaboration. And our teams that we've worked on over the years at OISE have been some of the best teaching years of my life. So I'm with you on that. So what's your favorite thing to teach, Larry?
Well, whatever I teach, it's through children's literature. So I get passionate when I talk. My literacy course was framed, if I was being interviewed for the job, it's framed on literacy, the different genres. So I do a workshop on reading, or one or two, more than one workshop on reading and writing, and of course, poetry and talk. And it's always through the lens of children's literature. So I love teaching the literacy courses. The dramatic arts courses have been in my career. I've taught the AQ courses since 1980, winter and summer. So do the math, that's a lot of teachers that I taught, but that's part of my active involvement, my creative spirit. And I you know, not just this year, but circumstances have changed about the capacity of how courses are delivered, but it's always been part of my soul in teaching dramatic arts, because I believe in the arts. So whatever teaching is, to answer that question, it has to be teaching through literature. I had the pleasure and thrill of teaching a grad course in the intercession this year through OISE on children's literature. And I said, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this without bringing my buckets of books in each week? And that was a challenge that we all faced with these with the pandemic. But I rose to the occasion. I had amazing students who responded, And we did work together to open our eyes about the possibilities of using children's literature in the curriculum. So books are at the heart of my teaching, and I love talking about books.
And if you go into Larry's office, it is a museum of books. There are so many there that are so interesting, that cover so many topics. And I always know if I ever need a recommendation of a book, Larry is the person I would consult with. So thank you.
We were out for dinner last night. This is just an anecdote. And my niece, I'll call her my niece, she asked, because everybody says Uncle Larry. She says, Uncle Larry, I need a picture book because my friend has been diagnosed with cancer. I need a picture book that deals with cancer. And it should be lesbian, gay, LGBTQ. Have you got any books like that? And I said, why are you challenging me this while I'm eating my muffin here? And I said, how about A Place for Pops by Heather Smith? I came up with a title. So it's not a test. I'm very fond of that book, which is about two seniors who are partners and how they deal with illness. So she said, Uncle Larry, you're amazing. But I love when students do that and just open their eyes to make those connections. And that's always been my career too. I know that the students that I teach, whether they're in my junior classroom, are not going to be readers for life, but I want to get them excited about reading and look at the potential for books in their lives and honor that they're reading all kinds of things. They're doing all kinds of reading that I don't do. And of course, in the university, they talk about, I don't have time to read, or I'm just reading articles. And so I said, well, that's a kind of reading too. I'm not just talking about novels. So I want to talk about reading for information and reading for pleasure. I'm not going to do that whole workshop, but books have been part of my life, and it's hard to keep up on my bookshelves, but I do.
And I find for me, and you are partly responsible for teaching me this, that picture books have so much information, whether it be for kids and adults alike. There's so many beautiful picture books that I would use if I'm doing an adult workshop. So
Right. And I'm sure we're going to deepen that as we chat along today.
Yeah, for sure. So Larry, why is it so important to have those difficult conversations with kids? What is it about kids and difficult conversations that we as adults, whether we are teachers or parents, that we need to understand?
Right. And so the lens that I'm looking at my teaching in recent months, of course, comes from the book that I published, Teaching Tough Topics. My publications have always been centered on choosing literature. My last book, Take Me to Your Readers, is about using literacy strategies with a range of genres. But I really was excited about this book, and it came, just fortuitously. Indigo Publishers asked me to do some book lists for them. They wanted some books about social justice issues, what they were calling multicultural literature, and how we can define that. So they came to me, and I started to put lists together, and I really got excited about the list for an initiative that they were working on. And I can't tell you the number of times students knock on my door, Larry, have you got a book to teach Black history? Have you got a book to teach racism? So my students' needs, and it comes from their courses or their needs or the lessons that they're doing in their practicum experiences. This evolved into a book about teaching tough topics. But to address the question about why, I took some notes here. We live in a challenging world, Jackie, surprise, surprise. And the conversation I would have had with you in January is different than I'm having with you in August. But we want kids to respect differences and other points of view, be tolerant of other points of view. My book, Creating Caring Classrooms, was about building compassion. We want to invite our community of readers to be compassionate about others. And in this world, it is about building compassion. And I'm not going to bring a political message to this screen today, but that's where we are in the world. And we have to, finding a place for equity and a place for belonging. It's tough in the world, and it's tough in the classrooms. So how can I, as a teacher, address that? And so my list of topics that I developed over time, again, took from the literature base, but teachers are nervous. So how do I teach poverty? How do I teach? Earlier we chatted about Indigenous identity. So I can review the topics that I chose, but teachers recognize a need to do that for the couple of reasons that I've already mentioned. And my answer is so simple: turn to a piece of children's literature to launch the conversations, to ask the questions, to have the children ask the questions, and together you can find some answers. So I have you know, um, I'm going to list the topics: race and diverse cultures, the immigrant and refugee experience, indigenous identities, the Holocaust, physical and mental challenges, poverty, death, loss and remembrance, gender identity and homophobia, bullying. So when you hear those topics, which one do you feel comfortable about teaching? Which one do you feel nervous about teaching? Which one do you think is vital to teach? They're all vital in their capacity, and how we choose to teach them can come from a context of something that's happening in the world, something that's happened in the classroom or the school community, or something that's happening in the children's lives or your own life. So that's how we choose to teach these topics, because the ministry document doesn't tell us to teach poverty. But if you recognize the need to do that, and the other invitation is in our busy curriculum. Teachers have a crowded curriculum we've talked about. So how do you find a place to address things that need to be taught and should be taught? And my invitation is just open your eyes to consider what you think is vital. And now I can get specific, because how can you not address a racism and Black Lives Matter in the current education world, and the BIPOC lens for looking at literature, for looking at learning, for looking at diversity, which we've always paid attention to, but certainly in my career of paying attention to diversity, what we used to call multiculturalism, but we have to broaden our definition of multiculturalism as well. It's not just about race. So how am I going to, or am I going to do it? And teachers say, well, I don't know how to do it. So does that mean, and I support that, and I don't make judgments about that. Does that mean I'm not going to do it? Well, I think it's a challenge for us to pay attention to how you're going to do it. And start with a book, it will do it. And I have many lists to support that for you. My book has done that. And the book is intended to, the framework of each chapter does that. Looking at the vocabulary of the tough topic. And in each chapter, there's two model lessons based on literature, and there's book lists to help support that particular topic or theme, and expert voices. So the structure of each chapter invites teachers to dip in and try to uncover the topic for their students. It just matters so much, because we want to create caring citizens of the world and deepen understanding. And if that's at the heart of your teaching, I think, how can we not address tough topics?
Absolutely. And I just want to give a sort of a shout out to Larry's workshops that he does recently. Thankfully, before the pandemic, I was able to attend at the Reading for the Love of It conference, Larry's workshop on having difficult conversations. And I can say I learned so much in that, whatever it was, 2 hours that we were there, on not only the actual books to use, but the way to do it, the how to do it, which, as you say, it's sometimes so challenging for teachers, and yet it's so necessary. So I highly recommend that we have difficult conversations and that we follow Larry's advice. So is there anything that teachers and parents should do, Larry, before they start in order to prepare to have the conversations? Is there something that they can do to, in essence, prepare themselves?
I think it's a matter of reflection. The big R word at OISE is reflection.
Right.
But what inspired you to at least contemplate this topic? So when I'm watching the media in the last couple of months, and certainly in the theater world and the entertainment world, they're talking about paying attention to Black lives in the industries and the art forms that they need. So where do these questions come from? In the introduction to my book, I talk about, like, there was bullying, a bullying incident happened in my classroom. And then there was a bully issue in the school community. So I, as a teacher, said, how am I going to help these kids understand that? So I got out a picture book, and it just exploded. I now have about 300 titles about the bullying issue, but I made a deliberate attempt to integrate learning. It was a 3-week, I'll call it unit. And the content was, or the topic was bullying or confronting the bully issue. So we have to help the kids confront the issues. And that came from a recognized need. So pay attention to the questions that you're asking, and then start asking more questions about, how do I begin? I mean, the book supports that. It tells you how to begin, but I'm just saying, I think parents and educators have to think about what issues concern you, why do they concern you, and what resources am I going to use to deepen the kids' understanding that in our curriculum, you know, extends reading, writing, and talk and media, moves into perhaps social studies learning, but it happens across the curriculum. So I think we've got to look at the resources and then figure, which book am I going to choose? Why am I choosing this book? Which book am I going to buy for myself, the library, my classroom library, my colleagues' library, that I'm going to spend time with? And I'm being upfront, one book isn't going to pay. So if I'm dealing with a book about bullying, I want the next day to look at another book, because those books serve as case studies for the issue. So think about how you're going to start collecting and building different conversations, because you want to have conversations. It's simple as having conversations. And then the wider response in terms of education, of course, is what response, am I going to have them write? Am I going to have them talk? Am I going to have them dramatize it? So we look at our response mode, which is your teaching, but we can look at the comprehension strategies. But parents, you just got to feel comfortable and open up your eyes to what conversations am I prepared to have. And Aidan Chambers gave me a gift, or us a gift in literacy, and it was part of my thesis work. And I'm giving that gift in 2 words, because this was from Aidan Chambers. He said, all you need to know to find out what somebody is taken from a text is the words, tell me. So start with the text and say, tell me what you think. Tell me what you wondered about, which is my favorite comprehension strategy, I wonder. And tell me what you liked or didn't like. And then you can begin the conversations. So that's my invitation, both educators and parents.
Thank you so much for that. And as you were talking, I was reflecting on what else is coming out of using literature from both a parent's perspective and a teacher's perspective with kids, is all of these difficult conversations and all of the content that is in the children's literature that we're going to use is also increasing their emotional intelligence. It's teaching them how to express themselves. It's teaching them how to develop interpersonal relationships, how to problem solve and make decisions. All of the components of emotional intelligence that we talk about in Hearts and Minds Matter are present in the use of these kinds of children's books. So thank you for that, Larry.
I know, and it just punctuated is Hearts and Minds. So how do we address the emotional literacies and the compassionate and empathetic understanding? And I'm about balance too. It's not the only way we're teaching. If you want to teach about bears and let how the bears have a picnic, that's great. Exactly. But I just think to have a place in the curriculum that this really matters, and just to open up the children's lens about being that community that we talked about earlier, and being caring of each other and caring of the world, and let them. And we're talking about different age levels too. And first of all, this applies to all age levels. Okay. Yes. So when you read a book about gender identity, Julie and the Mermaid, where he wants to pretend that he's a mermaid, we're looking at gender identity issues with a kindergarten, grade 1 class. But that same book can be used in grade 8 to have them look at the issues. So I think, of course, there's just the developmental needs, and the literature can help us do that. But whether you're doing a novel or a picture book or a nonfiction text, I think we've got to open up the lens to have them dip into that because of that. So in my notes, why children's literature, I'm just going to summarize it. It helps them make connections, raises questions, and that have meaningful discussions is really important. And this is the one I was trying to hit. And they learn about the identities of others, and they consider their own identities. Now that happens with teenagers more than grade one, but it's certainly apparent in a grade one kindergarten classroom. So I really think about the identities of other, and as they examine the identities of others, they reflect on their own identities. And then when they reflect on their own identities, they consider the people that they are living with and working with. So um, that's the rationale for that.
Yeah, I think it's so incredible, and you know, it's interesting to me too when I hear teachers, mostly I'm hearing it from teacher candidates learning to be teachers, but I don't think a 4-year-old should learn about death, or I don't think a 5-year-old should learn about LGBTQ issues. They're too young. And
Yeah.
I think, well, but they're watching television, they're watching movies, they're exposed to social media all the time. They're learning about the issues, whether you are teaching it to them or not. So
Right.
make sure you're in there.
In one sense, I can appreciate that. That's where it's a challenge for some teachers in particular to address this. But what are you teaching then? So what is the place, and who are they getting it from if not you? Where you come
Yeah.
together as a community. Death is a perfect example. One where that my niece asked me, "Have you got a book to help this little 5-year-old understand cancer?" Like, when do we teach it? And I'm not into bibliotherapy that the book's going to change their lives, but how do we unpack? And here's the big one too: the stories that the kids have in their heads.
Yes.
So they will have stories about their goldfish or their grandmother if you read a book. Um, that deals with that particular issue. Um, and I left out chapter 10 not intentionally, but chapter 10 is ripples of kindness.
Mm.
And it was a great discussion with my editor, who was brilliant at editing the book. And this was the last book she worked on. She passed away in April, which is
Oh.
sad for me because she worked so hard on this book. And I just wanted to bring it all together to give the kids some hope. And I came up with this chapter about kindness. And she says, "Well, Larry, that's not like any of the other chapters. We can't put it in." And I says, "The toughest topic to teach, the toughest of the toughest, is teaching kindness." And the industry has given us so many picture books about that. Whether you're doing All Are Welcome with primary class, which is a book that's about community as well. So I think we've got to wrap it up and think, how am my relationship with these kids at this time going to help them understand kindness? And it's one thing to put a banner on the wall, but you got to demonstrate it through the curriculum that you deliver and the modes of activity in your classroom. So are the kids working with others in different capacity? Are the boys working with the girls, and develop different stages of skills? We're not going to isolate groups. Those who can't read, come over here. But I think you've got to have heterogeneous and homogeneous groupings. So I think when I talk to my students, it's as simple as you've got to have independent, small group, and whole class every single day in your classroom. It's not just all about whole class. And the tricky one is that small group, which includes pairs. So it's looking at the organization and the beliefs of what you want to happen in the classroom. And I think it can happen if we want kindness to matter.
Absolutely. You know, I'm thinking about my own experience when I taught in schools. And one year, because I was a resource teacher, I had flexibility to leave the school and go to another school and be in the grade 1 classroom where they learned that morning that their teacher had been killed in a car accident. And it was children's literature that we used to help the kids understand. And another time when I taught in a school and one of our prized, sweetest grade 8 girls passed away from cancer, it was literature that we turned to help the students. So the 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 reach is huge of what we can do with children's literature. So Larry, we've kind of touched on this, but from your experience, what are kids' reactions to having these difficult conversations through the use of literature?
I would say the answer for me is, before looking at these tough topics or paying attention to them, or bringing them to the forefront, what kind of community do they have in the classroom? So
Absolutely.
I think we're looking at that. I talked to my students the other day about, what works about literature circles. I said, the one thing that works is have the kids work together before. So I'm very much interested, and you are too, about the social growth. I mean, our classrooms are places for cognitive growth, emotional growth, physical growth, in certain subjects in particular, and social growth. And my subject, my teaching, if we get those kids to work together and listen to each other and question with each other, collaborate with each other, then that's the starting point. And that was the premise of creating caring classrooms.
Yes.
So we wanted to write a book about bullying, but the 5 chapters are: 1 is community, 2 is you got to have communication, 3 is you got to have collaboration. You got to have, it's important to address collaboration, the group skills. Number 4 is compassion. How do we invite the students to react to the stories? And then our 5th chapter, Kathy and Lundy and I, is confronting the bully issue. 12 lessons about bullying. If you don't have those other 4 in place, you can't even pretend to talk about confronting the bully issue. So it's about relationships. So I think my answer to the question is a little bit of a digression, but what is in place before? But when you do get to the heart and to the affective domain, something happens in the child and in the classroom. And whether they're reading the books independently because they need to talk about it and they really understand, where a student reads a book where the character says, go back to your country, and a kid, reads that and says, that's just like my life, or what I heard in my life, or not, or they wonder about that. How could somebody say that? You're opening up the doors, and it's windows, mirrors, and doors that we talk about, not me, but from the experts. And I think the kids, when they move to that, like when you say, what did you like about the book? Well, if it touched your heart, it's been a good book. And so they're receptive to that. They're receptive to that. And then if we pay attention to those emotions as well. And they see you as a human. You have to be vulnerable enough to share your own connections and vulnerabilities. And that's what adds to it.
I love that. And at Hearts and Minds Matter, we're all about creating the safe space, creating the space where kids feel safe enough to open up, as you say, to be vulnerable. The teacher has to model it. The teacher has to constantly create that and build that inclusion so that we're breaking the barriers down that exist between not just kids, they exist between adults. And how do we break those down? We do it through building inclusion and community in the classroom, knowing that it's safe and that what happens in our classroom stays in our classroom. So building that kind of sense of mutual respect and confidentiality is so important for kids. And when, in my experience, when you open that, when you create boundaries for kids, you're reliable, all of these kinds of things, the kids will in fact start to open up. It just opens their world. And the biggest thing is they all know they belong. We've been hearing certainly over the last few months and beyond how people don't feel like they belong. And we need that. We need that to be vulnerable.
Yeah, I think I used the word belonging a lot in my book, finding a place of belonging. But you and I are like-minded, and I'd be, here we are on screen. I'd be the first to admit that it is hard work. Yes. So whether I'm teaching my family grouping of grade 3, 4, 5s, which is my last classroom experience in Peel, or my adults that I meet in September, I work really, really, really hard to build community, and I've only got so much time, so much activity to do that, to show them that I'm in it with them and I'm receptive to their ideas as we work through this curriculum. But you've got to pay attention to building that community, and it's not easy. No. And it is vital. We can pay it when something, and Jackie, I have a trick. I go into a classroom and I say, okay, let's get into a partners, and I can tell in a second whether there's community in the classroom. Yeah. If the boys are going to go with the boys, then gender is another issue. I'm accepting of that, not judging it. But will they work with different kids? Will they always go to their best friends? And where is the place for that kid who says, I don't have a partner, nobody wants to work with me, or I don't want to work with anybody? So finding a partner is one of my tricks, and I can tell in a minute if there's a healthy classroom in that capacity. But it takes time. I admit that it's not easy. And I'm going to finish off with this. In my classroom, I had 2 banners, and the banners sort of represent who you are and what you want the place to be. I had a banner that I bought from Scholastic, and it says, "Everyone is a teacher if we choose to let them be." So I
Oh,
want, it's one thing to have the banner, but you got to demonstrate, like, I'm learning with you guys
that's
as
right.
well. Who knows what they get from that, but I just want to say, I'm learning with you about topics, about life through you. Everyone is a teacher if we choose to let them be. And then there was a banner that we made called "Ooh Wee, Ain't We a Having Fun?" And that line came from a picture book. And hopefully in Larry's classroom, we laughed. And you know what? They laugh in Larry's classroom. My final mantra, I do have a website that I'll post for you. And I'll finish off with this, Jackie, is I have a website, Dr. Larry Recommends. You can get my postings of literature. And my banner is 3 words: active, joyful learning. I want the students to be active. That doesn't mean getting out of your chairs and running around all the time, but I want them to be active participants in their learning. And I want them joyful. For me, is when the kids feel successful. And every kid is going to succeed in your classroom. So when they succeed, when they feel successful, they are joyful. And when they're active and they're joyful, they're learning. So that banner is active, joyful learning, which is the little mantra. I ask teachers, what is your banner for teaching as well? Your motto. And I just have to finish off, that was developed or connected with my dear friend David Booth, who passed away recently, 2 years ago almost. And he says, here's what your banner is going to be. And I listened to him because if David said it, it was right.
That's right.
But,
We all listen to David like that.
but it's about having those mentors. And earlier we talked about the teacher next door, the community, your staff, whether it's the division or in the school. And it is, you know, having those very important people in your lives to show you what matters, and it helps you reflect and question that those ripples of kindness.
Absolutely. And, you know, David was also one of my mentors, as you were, Larry, or are, still are. And I always remember that I did you know, a tribes training a number of years ago, and the students voted to have David come as part of our training. And he showed up. I didn't tell them that he was coming, and he showed up. And honestly, you'd have thought that the most famous person in the world had showed up to our class, and he read for them, and he, you know, he joked with them as only David could do. And it's just such a gift that both you and David bring to the work of teachers, and I truly appreciate it, that from both of you. So my final question for you, what would be your top 5 picks for teachers to invest in? I know that's maybe a hard question to narrow down, but if they're going to invest between now and September, what might they be?
Okay, nice talking to you, Jackie. Have a good day. Okay, well, no, I am going to leave the link because I do post titles often what I'm reading, so teachers have that. And my books have a book list as well. No, but why it's a hard question, and it's an exciting question for me, is: are we talking about picture books? Are we talking about books for grade 4? Are we talking about adolescent books? So it's I need the context for asking those questions. But I'm going to give you 3 titles.
Okay,
And,
fair
and
enough.
it'll probably lead to more titles as I chat. But well, you're welcome to look at my book list. I developed a very, very comprehensive book list about Black Lives Matter, because there's many titles that address privilege, and particularly YA novels. So I have that list that teachers can get as well. There is I think I'm very fond of the novel Wish Tree by Catherine Applegate. It's about a community. It's told from the point of view of a tree and a community, and the tree brings the animals together and the community together until one day a Muslim girl moves into the community and sees a racist message carved into the tree. My heart sunk on page 50 when I read that,
Yeah.
but I think it's a great one to read aloud and have discussions. So Wish Tree, Catherine Applegate, I promoted. There's a book called The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse. The Boy, the Mole, the Fox, and the Horse by Charles Mackesy. Now, I bought that book in England, because it was the book of the year, The Waterstones. And I came back, it was in December, and I think I gave about 10 or 12 copies for Christmas and Hanukkah. It's just a book about, I'm just going to say it's about kindness. It's the four characters of the boy, the mole, the horse, and the horse, the boy, the mole, and the fox. And it's beautifully illustrated. It's done in calligraphy. And I just think it's a great sit down and let's talk. And just like some teachers might remember The Giving Tree, this is a book that talks about relationships and partnerships. And then I came back to Canada, and lo and behold, Indigo had it as their book of the month by Heather. And I said, see, even I knew that it was a great book, but I've been sharing that. And my students in my class responded to that book as well. And the one I'm going to finish off with, I want every teacher, grade 5 and up, student grade 5 and up must read Ghost Boy by Jewel Parker Rhodes. On page 1, a black boy is shot by a white policeman, and the boy goes up to heaven. And so the book is his view of the world, and the white policeman trial is taking place, and the boy is looking down from heaven at the white policeman's trial. And it was all because this boy had a toy gun on him, and the policeman shot him without asking questions. So certainly leaping off the pages of history, how to make sense. And up in heaven, he meets black boys who were brutalized throughout history.
Oh my God.
It's a powerful book. It's a great read aloud. Jewel Parker Rhodes, and I have other books that support that particular theme, but since you asked me for a title, I recommend Ghost Boys. If I was a grade 5 teacher and up, I don't like putting grade levels. It depends how they're getting it, but I think that 10, 11, and to 14-year-old will get the most from this book. And it begs the question, how are they doing? Are they reading it on their own? Do I have 34 copies in the classroom? Am I reading it aloud? Is it a small group and we're going to read other books about racism? I can tell you great ways to organize a classroom, but the book sparks that, and that's been my belief.
Love that, Larry. Larry, thank you so much. It has been such a wonderful experience talking to you today. I miss you. I miss seeing you in the hall. I miss catching up on Coronation Street. Both Larry and I are Coronation Street lovers. And just the fun we've had over the years. And just thank you so much for your dedication, your heartfelt connection to teachers and to children. As a teacher educator, former teacher, and as a parent, I wish that my kids had you as an instructor. Thank you for the work you do.
I love talking about books, so thank you. Happy summer to you. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you so much.
Okay.